Welcome to Blaze News, the mandate day 38. I'm Jill Savage. Tonight on the agenda, Donald Trump drops a bombshell promising the release of documents related to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy by tomorrow.
We are tomorrow announcing and giving all of the Kennedy files. So people have been waiting for decades for this, and I've instructed my people that are responsible, lots of different people put together by Tulsi Gabbard, and that's going to be released tomorrow.
We'll be looking forward to that. A recent CNN poll may leave Democrats feeling a little blue. The Democrat Party's favorability ratings among Americans dropped to a record low of just 29%, a drop of 20 points since January of 2021. In a Truth Social post, President Trump declared that Biden's preemptive pardons for the January 6th committee, Anthony Fauci, and others are void. Trump wrote that the pardons that sleepy Joe Biden gave to the unselect committee of pathetic political thugs and many others are hereby declared void, vacant, and of no further force or effect because of the fact that they were done by Autopen. Trump was asked by reporters. Here's what he had to say.
I would say that they're null and void because I'm sure Biden didn't have any idea that it was taking place. And somebody was using an Autopen to sign off and to give pardons to, as an example, just one example, but the J6 Unselect Committee.
However, he clarified that the decision will ultimately be up to the courts. The wins just keep coming as White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt announced that egg prices are continuing to plummet under Trump.
There was also a new report out this morning about wholesale egg prices. They continue to fall. A dozen eggs are now $3.10 cheaper since January 1st. That's a 47% decrease overall.
President Trump and Vladimir Putin are set for a phone call tomorrow to discuss ending the war in Ukraine. Trump is optimistic about the call and told reporters that there's a very good chance of reaching a deal. On Truth Social, Trump declared that for every shot fired for the Houthis, Iran will be held responsible and suffer dire consequences. Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt alerted the Iranians that the weakness of the Biden administration has ended.
But there's a new sheriff in town, and his name is Donald Trump. And the world is officially on notice. America has a commander-in-chief whose peace-through-strength approach is unwavering and should not be tested. As the president said, no terrorist force will stop American commercial and naval vessels from freely sailing throughout the world. Houthi terrorists and their Iranian backers should not cross President Trump again, and the president has made that clear today.
Well, let's check in on the tariff wars. Canadian officials say that they have a better understanding of the motives behind Trump's tariffs after meeting with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. An Ontario representative explained that the tariffs are a global policy of the United States to help with the yearly deficit spending. On Saturday, Trump signed a proclamation that invoked the 1798 Alien Enemies Act, allowing him to deport over 200 Venezuelan gang members to El Salvador. While speaking with reporters, Trump explained why he invoked the act.
Do you feel that you're using it appropriately right now?
Well, this is a time of war because Biden allowed millions of people, many of them criminals, many of them at the highest level. They emptied jails out. Other nations emptied their jails into the United States. That's an invasion.
The Trump administration is weighing travel restrictions that would target 43 countries. 11 countries would be completely banned from the United States, including Afghanistan, Iran, and Venezuela. UFC star Conor McGregor visited the White House to sit down with President Trump and discuss issues faced by the people of Ireland. During his guest appearance at the White House press podium, the former champ ripped into the Irish government for its mass migration policies.
What is going on in Ireland is a travesty. Our government is the government of zero action with zero accountability. You know, our money is being spent on overseas issues that has nothing to do with the Irish people. The illegal immigration racket is running ravage on the country. There are rural towns in Ireland that have been overrun in one swoop, that have become a minority in one swoop. So issues need to be addressed, and the 40 million Irish Americans, as I said, need to hear this, because if not, there will be no place to come home and visit.
We clearly all got the green memo today as it's St. Patrick's Day, but Blaze News editor-in-chief Matthew Peterson decided not to go with green today. It's a controversial move here on St. Patrick's Day. What you did.
I wore green this weekend. If I wore it today and you were wearing green, it's over the top. I'm already Irish. I already have Irish in me, so it's okay.
Let's go with
need to wear green.
Donald Trump and the JFK files. He's promising them tomorrow. I hope this is not going to be a Pam Bondi situation, that it actually comes out and we get what we expect then tomorrow.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think Trump and the White House know what happened with Bondi. The White House, certainly White House officials are well aware of how that went over. They weren't involved in it, but they saw that. So I would think that this is real, but, you know, believe it when you see it, because, again, the problem is like with the Epstein files, what are the people imagine like there's some set of files somewhere, right? There's not. There's a bunch of information that's all over the place, that's been all over the place in this case for decades, and that also has been, you know, plenty of time has passed for it to be hidden for decades. So are they really scraping through, you know, anything and everything that is potentially controversial and putting it out there? We will judge soon enough. But if Trump himself is saying it and indicating this is real, then I think we have a reason to believe.
And we have things coming out from official White House pages today on social media. There's a deportation video that also plays the song that's very popular called Closing Time. I can't believe that this is the timeline that we're living in, that official government pages are going out there and just giving us even more than we voted for.
I mean, closing time on the White House account to gang members being deported. If you had said this a year ago, right? And we're almost spoiled now. If you recognize that out there, you in the audience, like, we're almost spoiled now. We look around and we think, oh yeah, of course the White House is posting, you know, that's just the way it is. We're just used to it because it happens every day. And this is, you're in the middle of a sweeping cultural change, and the wave is moving so fast, but everything is moving so fast at the same time that you have to realize, you have to stop and take account as to what's going on. We are living in the middle of a realignment.
With that in mind, the Democratic numbers that came in from CNN, I mean, I think it's 7% that strongly favor what the Democrats are doing. It's only 29% that approve at all. And like I said, that was a 20-point drop from 2021. How quickly the Democrats are falling. Yeah.
So, I mean, look, you want to say, you're supposed to say in moments like this, like, look, I can't really predict what's going to happen. You know, what goes up must come down or whatever. Let me just go out on a limb because I'm comfortable there. A long time ago, I said this was the end of the Republican Party as you know it. And I said that in 2015, 2016. It was clear when Trump won that nomination, the Republican Party, as everyone had known it, was done. Over with, kaput. And it took a long time for a lot of people to understand that. Almost 10 years later, now finally everyone understands this is Trump's Republican Party now. It is transformed. I'm going to go ahead and say the same thing about the Democratic Party now. There is no new leader, but what they were is broken. So the Democratic Party, as you've known it, I do believe is over. They will reconstitute, they will come back, but it will not be the same thing because what they were before doesn't work and is fundamentally broken, and everyone knows it, and you can see them trying the old tropes over and over again, and it doesn't even work. And we're not even excited enough about this. I don't think people are even as excited. It's hard for them to even believe that it's true, but I'm here to tell you it is true.
In that same poll, AOC was the person who got the most votes for the leader of the Democratic Party. So if that tells you where they are right now, that is not a great spot to be in.
Let's just say, like, stipulate for the record, that's not what I'm talking. That's not the future, right? We want that. We encourage it. But they don't know who their Trump is yet, right? They don't know who their new figure is yet. They are in complete disarray and they are fundamentally broken, and their popularity is going down by the day.
What the American people are looking for is truth and accountability. Steve Baker will have a bombshell piece that ties Nancy Pelosi's fixer to January 6th. He'll be on to explain all of that coming up. Let's get into Good Ranchers, because since 2017, over 140,000 family farms have shut down. And that's because all the meat from the grocery stores, they're not coming from American farms anymore. It's coming from overseas. It's all mass production and low cost. They would rather have that than quality. But this spring, we need to change that. It's time to spring into action and put American farms first, because nothing can beat American quality. And that's why I choose GoodRanchers.com, because they stand for integrity and tradition and 100% American raised meat. All the products for GoodRanchers.com have trustworthy ingredients, and we know that the meat is born, raised, and harvested right here in the United States, so you know exactly where it comes from. It doesn't have any of the antibiotics, there's no hormones or seed oils. It's just one simple ingredient, and that's meat. Good Ranchers is delivered straight to your door, so you can have that farm-to-table transparency, and you're supporting American ranchers and getting the good meat that you can feel good about serving, and you get to skip the grocery store. So right now, Good Ranchers is running their Spring into Action promotion, so when you subscribe to any of their boxes, you get to decide if you want free chicken nuggets, free bacon, ground beef, or salmon in every order for a year. Just be sure to use my code Jill at checkout and get $40 off your first order. It's the best deal that they've ever done. So spring into action and help American farmers with every purchase. Visit GoodRanchers.com now. And remember, code Jill for free meat for a year and $40 off. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. The more we learn about January 6th, the more it becomes clear that we weren't told the full story. A shocking new report exposes how Nancy Pelosi's political fixer, Aaron Black, was working behind the scenes that day at the Capitol. Now, this is the same Aaron Black who was previously caught orchestrating political chaos for the Democrats. Now we're learning that he was embedded at the Capitol on J6 and raising serious questions about what really happened that day and who was involved behind the scenes. Investigative journalists Steve Baker and Joe Hanneman have been relentless about exposing the truth about January 6th, and Steve is here to break it all down. So what's the latest that you and Joe Hanneman have found this time?
This is a very interesting story in that we have never had a name to put to the events of January 6th in the way that we want to. Now, everybody has an idea. For years and years and years, they've been calling it the Fedsurrection, or they blame the Capitol Police, or they blame Nancy Pelosi, or they blame somebody else. There's always these theoretical names, but there's never been an actual connection to somebody in that world, those circles, or those offices. And what we have now is we have a name to start with. It's not the only name we know, because this is going to be a series that Joe and I are working on. So there are other names in this series coming up. But the first one we wanted to show to the American public was Aaron Black, a.k.a. Aaron Minter, which is his real name. Nobody knows why he uses the name Aaron Black or why he switched to that, but that's been predominantly his main name since the Occupy Wall Street days, where he was a principal organizer of Occupy Wall Street. And then he kind of goes and falls off the radar for a little while, and he shows back up in 2016, caught in a Project Veritas video sting, actually admitting to starting the violence at a Trump rally in Chicago. So bad that they actually had to cancel the rally. Not only did he have the violence outside, he had over 100 of his operatives on the inside causing disruptions. And so then we lose track of him for a little while again, and he pops back up with the title on his social media as Senior Political Advisor at Team Pelosi. And then we had to fill in the blanks. So that's what Joe and I have been working on for quite a while now.
I mean, this is unbelievable stuff, and it really it represents in one way a beginning and sort of an end in my mind, because it's the culmination of years of work on your part and Joe's part, looking at January 6th. Say a little bit about what led you to this story.
This story came about because after the work that Joe and I did, well, actually it was within less than an hour after the assassination attempt on July 13th last year, President Trump in Butler, PA. I get a message from you. You said you and Joe are on the story. Okay, so we drop everything and we threw ourselves into that. One of the things that we concluded through the sourcing that we had at the time, we've talked about it here on this program, is that the intelligence community, sources we have, the Department of Defense special operatives that we talk to on a regular basis, they all concluded that Thomas Crooks was groomed, that this was not something he did on his own. What they said actually was, we recognize our own handiwork, which is kind of scary. So after we did this series of stories,
It's terrifying, really.
well, because these are our guys saying we recognize our handiwork, because this is what they do overseas. They could develop anywhere from 8 to 10 young men at a time in case they needed to activate them as a human bomb, as a shooter, for whatever they needed. And so all of a sudden, a few weeks later, I get a message from somebody from the intelligence community who I did not know, but he had an interesting connection to Glenn Beck going back about 17 years to a story that Glenn Beck did back then. And as a result of that, he's been a fan of Glenn's, and then he's been a fan and a reader of Blaze Media, so Blaze News. So he was reading our stories, Joe's and my stories on this assassination attempt, and he concurred. He said, I just wanted to congratulate you guys because, like your sources, I recognize my own handiwork in Thomas Crooks. So he and I began talking, had the opportunity to kind of vet him out. And then we became very friendly in our conversations back and forth about politics and other things going on in the world. And then one day he finally said, if you really want to know what happened on January 6th, you need to look at a couple of names. He said, look at Aaron Black. I didn't know who Aaron Black was. America didn't know who Aaron Black was. I'm assuming James O'Keefe knew it because he caught him in a sting back 8 years ago or so, but the world didn't know who he was. And then he gave me a couple of other names that we needed to be looking at as well. And so I casually just started the process of looking him up, saw the connection to Occupy Wall Street, began to realize that this guy is a lifelong agitator, street organizer.
Yeah, well, and I listened to you say this, and Thomas Crooks, he has a very small digital footprint, right? Aaron Black, I know that's part of the story where you guys were trying to figure this out, because you guys, it's not like you just did a Google search and were like, oh, Aaron Black, here he is. No, you had to go into the dark web parts and re-piece together certain aspects of this. So at that point, right? It's not like the three of us are sitting here. You can figure out information about us if you really wanted to, right? We aren't on the deep dark web side of the internet where you have to piece all of this together.
Yeah, anybody wants to know anything about me, just go to my Facebook page. It's all there. Kids, family, the whole thing. My background. I've lived my life very transparently on Facebook, but not this guy. And he's done his best to keep everything off of the web that he can. Now, he's not been successful at keeping videos he doesn't own off, like, for instance, the Project Veritas videos, but everything else he's been pretty successful at doing. And so it was tough. So we had to develop sources, people who know him, people who have worked with him. And that is where the story really develops.
So let's talk about what this sort of character does. I mean, the reason this is a story is because this is someone who is an operative. This is someone, right, who goes in and creates, agitates, creates violent situations or unpleasant situations that are public and involve demonstration. Like, he has a history of doing this both at Trump rallies and with Occupy. Okay. But let's talk about the dark arts in this situation of what these kinds of people may have been doing on January 6th.
Well, this is what one of our sources said about him, is that Aaron Black is a master of the dark political arts, and he's a master of diversion. He's a master of misdirection, these types of things, like a magician, and turning things to look one way as though they were. Because one of the things that we did capture him in, we found an article of him actually speaking to a high school group of wannabe political activists, and he was talking to them about how important it was to learn how to control the narrative. And you remember Nancy Pelosi's famous quote was about January 6th and the formation of that committee that she put together, is that the reason why they were doing that was because they needed to establish and then preserve the narrative of that day. And this is what he apparently is a master at. We can give countless examples. I don't know how much time we have to do that. But for instance, in 2016, he actually did a radio show and an interview with Breitbart. Okay, it's one of our, now this Black is a, you know, he's a comrade. He's a he's a linen wearing, you know, kind of cap guy. This is not a guy that's friendly to the right side of the political spectrum in this country. Yet, nevertheless, he did a story and an interview with Breitbart promoting the Trump candidacy in 2016. Now, why would he do that? It's because the Hillary campaign, who he was working with undercover and behind the scenes with through an organization called Democracy Partners, they had determined that their biggest threats in the general election was either Cruz or Rubio. So he was promoting Trump.
Right. Nobody thought that Donald Trump had a chance at that point in time. So what was Aaron Black? Let's go back to January 6th. What was he doing there that day? What do we know about his movements?
We know that he is a boots on the ground kind of guy, but he doesn't like to be seen. So what we have from our sourcing is that he had lied to somebody with whom he had a 15-year relationship. This person is mentioned in our story, Dustin Stockton, and that because of what he told him originally, that he was out of town. This is what Aaron told Stockton, was that he was out of town, and then suddenly Dustin Stockton saw a photo of Aaron Black on the Capitol steps that day, confronted him on it. He finally admitted that he had lied to him, and that's where the title of our article comes from, is this was an unforgivable breaking of trust that he had with him.
And the fact is that so Aaron Black also was talking to Stockton, who worked for a right-leaning group, and people from that group were concerned about the phone calls that Stockton was furtively, apparently, privately, secretly having with Black.
Not only was Aaron Black able to successfully cross the line over to the right from his predominantly left position, apparently Dustin Stockton has the same master of the dark political arts ability to cross the line over to the left as well. Now, in his depositions with the January 6th Select Committee, in his actual testimony under oath, he talks about how he would go undercover with those organizations, but we might be learning that he just happened to work for whoever paid the best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so these are people, in other words, who have worked for both sides, right, in these activist situations, and they are about shaping narratives. So the question is, like, who's paying for whom? Now, it looks like, in this case, Black is being paid for by Pelosi, right, in some fashion, or at least that's the assumption. When you see the picture, which you have to see, you have to go to the Blaze and look at this if you haven't already. The picture is priceless. It's straight out of The Godfather, where Nancy Pelosi just has her hand on his cheek. It's like she's talking to Fredo right there. But so when you see this going on now, so the idea would be that these people are pretending to be on whatever side is necessary in order to shape a narrative that will be public, and they are being paid. In the past, the examples we have anyway are through these kind of shadowy NGOs.
Right, and that's who they are getting paid with.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, we as taxpayers are ultimately financing the protest against our own candidates.
Right.
I mean, let's just call it what it is.
The NGOs, it's always going to come back to them every single time. That's what we're learning with every story that's coming up right now. But you did say this is part of a series. So how much further is this going to go? I know you can't go into all of it, but just, there's still a lot of stuff that's going to be coming out in the next few weeks.
Right.
Months.
I mean, we have only presented, when I say we, Joe and I have only presented a fraction of what we already have available, but yet every single day it continues to mushroom on us. I mean, just after the 5 a.m. publication of this story this morning, my DMs are filling up with people who know the principal characters and want to talk.
That's why we do what we do, and
makes it fun.
This is what makes it a good time, and this is just the beginning. So, if any of you know anything about Aaron Black, Stockton, or any of these people, get in touch with Steve Baker. Get in touch with us because we are not done. No. Steve and Joe are not done, and this is just the beginning of pulling on this thread.
Steve, I have to imagine people in DC are getting a little bit nervous now that you're getting closer, right? You have names now, like you said at the very top of this segment. You're finally naming names.
Yeah. And we know names that are going to make people uncomfortable, names that are going to make people even in our, well, let's just say our side of the political spectrum, it's going to make them uncomfortable. People that are maybe not as closely attuned as you and we are. But we're probably going to be okay with it when we get there.
I think we're going to be just fine with it. You know what? We can't wait, though, to see all of that come out. And the work that you and Joe have been doing on this is tremendous. And I just remember when we had you back here on the show on January 6th, and you were walking through the Capitol building, and everybody was like, oh, man, we really appreciate what you have been doing, all of the work that you've been putting in. So to see this kind of come full circle is a really cool moment.
Thank you.
Absolutely incredible. I hope Congress appreciates it. I hope everyone in Congress appreciates it, because we need to see some action coming out of this.
Well, the other big story is the Autopen right now. Can Joe Biden's pardons be undone? The director of the Oversight project will be on to break down all of the investigation into Biden's Autopen. Coming up next.
Perhaps criminal or illegal behavior if staff members were signing the President of the United States autograph without his consent.
Biden is on the record talking about issuing preemptive pardons to these people.
But was he aware of his signature being used on every single pardon? That's a question you should ask the Biden White House.
Is there any evidence on that he wasn't aware of it?
You're a reporter. You should find out.
Okay,
Sean.
The perfect response. Well, President Trump declared all of Biden's preemptive pardons null and void because they were done by Autopen. This all came from the Oversight project, and Mike Howell is the executive director of the Oversight project, and he's here for the full backstory on how we got here. So, Mike, how did you guys uncover this Autopen story that now has the full nation's attention?
Yeah, so this goes back to the summer when, everyone was talking about whether Joe would drop out or not. We were knee deep in, figuring out issues related to that, and also his competency. We were suing for the release of the audio tape from her interview where her said he's too incompetent to stand trial. And so we had the idea, let's look at all the documents he signed, because we don't think, if he's as competent as he looks, that he was signing any of these things. And so that's what we did. And then about 10 days ago, A.G. Bailey from Missouri sent a letter to the White House calling this all into question. And we hit that go button and we launched our findings on the internet. It's very obvious that the vast majority of documents he was signing were auto-penned. We released further information that directly calls into question a lot of the specific pardons. That's when it seems the auto-pen was on overdrive. And then I think really the biggest thing comes from our friends at the New York Post, who got basically Biden White House officials to admit, okay, this is huge, because before it was a theory, now it's an admission. That's while working in the White House, aides were concerned that there was a lot of unauthorized use of the auto pen going around, and no one really thought the authority was there. And now it's all in question. And actually, it's really not in question, because President Trump said the official position of the executive branch is that these pardons are null and void. So if one of them gets, held charged criminally or called in before Congress, good luck to them. They have a pardon that's worth as much as a $3 bill.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So what are the next steps? I mean, this is an amazing story, right? I mean, if this were on the other side, I hate to go there. I mean, this would be dominating the headlines, because you literally have a person in office, right, who is not in office. You have someone who is a dead letter, and the letter is being auto-penned, and now everyone's using that phrase because of what you did. But the chain of events now is that, exactly as you said, A, you have an admission on their part that people within the White House were worried about this happening, and it was in fact happening in some manner. And then you have B, President Trump saying, you know what, I don't regard this as valid. What do you think happens next in terms of evidence or proof, or what do you think the courts would want to see if this ultimately goes to them?
So there's a few things that could happen next that we'll be suggesting. We're releasing kind of a very lengthy investigative memorandum with the constitutional, historic, and legal theory guarding all of this and underpinning it, and then what could be the next animating kind of actions. The most obvious one is the Trump Department of Justice, or anybody else, depending on what district it's in, could charge these people criminally. And then the pardons will be tested in the course of that criminal prosecution. Another even more obvious one is Congress could subpoena these individuals to appear before Congress, and they cannot rely on their pardon or anything else to shield them from coming in. And very important here is one of their secondary defenses would be an assertion of executive privilege. You know, they could claim, I was giving advice to the president, therefore you're not allowed to talk to me. Well, revenge is best served cold, because guess what? Biden waived executive privilege for the first time in history for Trump officials in the first term over January 6th. So they don't have an executive privilege protection whatsoever. And so they're going to get hit from a lot of angles. And in the course of doing so is where those pardons will be tested constitutionally. And what I think is honestly most important to all of this, of course, I want to see these crooks held accountable. But in the course of the investigation, we will necessarily find out who was the president the last 4 years, who was utilizing this Autopen, what mechanisms there were, who was calling the shots. And I think that's going to be such a valuable and necessary part of the historical record we'll get at.
Yeah, because we learned back in 2005, the Department of Justice said that if it's a pardon, it cannot be an auto pen. And I want to know how deep this goes, because it does say that there are 65 pardons. And you guys think, is it anywhere between 40 and 60 that you guys are looking at? Is that the numbers that you guys have?
It's going to be far over thousands, because the grant of the mass pardon to the death row inmates and all others, that was a huge one stroke of the Autopen. And so that those pardons are in question as well. This is going to explode very, very quickly. I mean, the January 6th committee pardon one alone, which contemplated members and staff. I'm talking about, Benny Thompson, Adam Schiff, all those staff members. That's, in the dozens right there. The Biden family members and all the associated criminal activity there. This could grow very, very fast. And these criminal prosecutions, a lot of them would be really related to kind of the corrupt activities we saw rise to the, highest levels of power in the Democratic political machine.
Well, yeah, you mentioned January 6th. Senator Jim Banks demanded investigations into Adam Kinzinger, Liz Cheney, and other J6 committee members after Trump declared their pardons void. So Kinzinger had this to say in response. Listen.
So I just saw that Trump is threatening the January 6th committee again. Listen, this dude knows that this is the thing that embarrasses him. He won't admit it embarrasses him because he's trying to pretend like he didn't do anything. He's obsessed. He's more obsessed with me and Liz Cheney than his freaking golf score. Hey, Trump, bring it on, dude. You weak, whiny, tiny man.
Oh, man. Would you say, does Trump's statement carry any legal weight that would allow for these investigations here?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a complete green light to the Department of Justice to prosecute these people. And Adam Kinzinger never got over not being picked as Trump's Air Force lead. That's where all this stems from. He is a very burned man, and he's just running on fumes there. That's hilarious. As for Liz Cheney, she's wrapped up in this as well. But if there's one thing that the Cheneys should be familiar with, it's never-ending conflicts. And so she's back in the middle of the never-ending one that centers her own criminal liability now.
So, I mean, this is just one example of the fallout right here. I mean, and the fallout is real. I mean, here's something that, I had already just let go in my mind that these people were not going to be able to be investigated for this stuff. And it was very precise what the Biden administration did or what the Autopen did, because they needed to protect them, because what that committee did, what these people did is shameful. So Jim Banks immediately is picking this up. God bless him. I love that. And saying, I'm going to go after them. Again, like you're saying, this is going to mushroom cloud, right? Because there's a ton of action, actual, steps that will be taken by many people on the right at this point to go after these people on precisely where really the pardon painted the target.
That's absolutely right. I mean, real friends take the time to sit down and sign their friends' pardons, and Biden couldn't even do that. And it's unclear whether he even knew this was happening. Remember the context of the January 19th. People were competing for pardons. People were lobbying for them, advocating for them. Are we to believe that President Biden was arbitrating all those disputes in his final days in office? Absolutely not. So this investigation is going to get into that point too. Recall that Vindman didn't get a pardon. He was pretty burnt by it. And so we're going to see what was traded for these things. And I'm glad to see Senator Jim Banks jump in, because there are so many layers and angles to this. And it's really going to peel back and answer some of the fundamental questions I think we all want. And perhaps most importantly, and we talk about this all the time, we just need a dose of accountability in Washington, D.C., and this opens the door for that.
Yeah. Now, Mike, I want to ask you just about Biden in general. I mean, you've noticed, right? He's disappeared. We don't know if Joe Biden is alive or dead at this point. No one's seen him in a while. Do you know anything about his current state?
I don't. I sent out the search parties, some ice cream, shops or wherever little kids in their hair gather for him to smell them. But I haven't seen him back in the public eye. I mean, I imagine he was on his last legs very, very clearly. I'm sure he is probably isolated, getting extreme medical care at this time. Unlike his son Hunter Biden, who just told the court that he was deadbeat and couldn't pay anything, and then went on a junket to South Africa. I think Joe's convalescing somewhere.
Yeah, Mike, if anything's going to lure him out, that is definitely the way that it's going to be done. But thanks so much for all the work that you guys are doing over there with Oversight Project, because this story is taking off in a huge way. I mean, Donald Trump's even talking about it now. So congratulations to you guys and just getting the truth out there.
Hey, I appreciate it. And I'll close with a little bit of paperwork. We got the pardons here with their big Autopen, and just to make things abundantly clear, here's the legal effect, okay?
Perfect.
It's go time if people start acting on this stuff.
Mike, we appreciate it so much. We'll talk to you soon. Peterson, when you look at this story, and we know that Mike and his team is out there doing a ton of research on so many different projects. So it is good to see, because these are things that are obviously has the entire nation's attention right now.
Yeah, what I love about my man, Mike Howell, is that he goes after it. He doesn't care. He's part of the new order, not the old. And what he's doing is really amazing. I mean, there's a number of people behind the scenes who help Oversight with all manner of things, and they just go for the jugular. And he has a great sense and instinct of where that is at any time and place. So right now, the Autopen thing, imagine, in the past, we would have let this go. Like, oh yeah, Biden was a senile old man, but who knows? It was bad. Yes, but we're noblesse oblige. We all are nice to each other, whatever. This is a situation where no, people need to pay. And what senile Biden did with the pardons was put up a protective wall around a bunch of guilty people who deserve justice. So this is a really important story. This is something we're not going to stop covering. And this is something that is actively moving forward from the president on down.
Well, I think that the nicest compliment that we could give Mike and the Oversight Project, I feel like they have a Donald Trump-like work ethic. They are out there doing stuff all the time, and we appreciate that from them so much. But don't go anywhere, because when we come back, we'll showcase how viewers are getting into the St. Patrick's Day spirit after this. Well, happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone in the audience. With that in mind, of course, that had to be the question that I was asking people on X today. So I asked, what's the best way to celebrate St. Patrick's Day? A glass of Guinness, rocking all green, corned beef and cabbage, or are you skipping the hype? Peterson, skipping the hype is by far and away what this audience has decided that they were going to do this year. Now, I will say corned beef and cabbage is second with just about 23%, but skipping the hype, 49% of people are not celebrating St. Patrick's Day. Do you believe it, or are you calling BS?
I mean, first I want to say good, as someone who has a lot of Irish heritage. Good, skip the hype. Look at me. That's great. You guys are all cool. We're skipping the hype right now. I'm not wearing green. But another part of me thinks you're all full of crap. And actually, we're all, myself included, going to do something like this tonight, regardless. And we're just playing it cool online. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
Listen, because I know firsthand, you did not skip the hype. You're not wearing green today, but you were over the weekend at a neighborhood St. Patrick's Day party. So you can't even say that you're not.
No, I can't.
Part of.
I'm not
St.
above
Patrick's
any.
Day.
I have to bow down to some kind of tradition. Yes, and there's nothing wrong with celebrating St. Patrick's Day. So yeah.
Well, let's get to some of the audience replies. And Fred Bell kicks it off. He says, the best way to celebrate, chugging green beer like a savage leprechaun and pretending you're Irish for 24 hours. Bonus points if you yell top of the morning at strangers until they flee in terror. I don't know if we're ever going to get a better response to any question that we ever have on this show besides that one, Fred.
Yes, no. Savage leprechaun is a solid phrase, and Fred deserves a lot of credit for that. And, you know, when he describes it this way, you need to realize one of the geniuses of America is that it takes these, you know, sacred holidays and commercializes them, yes, but also like there is something wonderful about St. Patrick's Day, as terrible as some of it is, and this kind of gets at the wonderful aspect of it. Yes.
Heretic Dave is he's listening to the show multiple times. You know this with his answer. He says, or perhaps a good old-fashioned pub crawl with Chris Bedford. There should be a contest with that as the prize. You know what? I think that we could probably talk Bedford into something like that next year. I think that's not a stretch.
I think I'd have to twist his arm about this much, and he'd do it, and he'd be the perfect person to do it too, because and it would be an incredible prize to win, because what could be better than doing a pub crawl today, you know, in any of the major, like especially East Coast cities, but DC with Bedford, that'd be great.
Yeah, Bedford let us know early on that he would not be on the show today, but he at least sent a picture in. This is Chris Bedford at 9:05 a.m. Eastern Time. Already with a beverage in his hand. So I can't wait to talk to him at some point. Honestly, tomorrow on the show, you guys are going to enjoy it just as much as we are. We're all going to be gauging how Bedford's day was together.
I mean, I want to call him right now and just see how he's doing. Right now, FaceTime live. Chris, what's going on? But he may be asleep by now. I don't know.
Yeah, we need to make sure that he's still employed tomorrow and the rest of the week to come on the show, because he is our DC insider and gets us all that good information.
Yes. He's not fired, though, because he did take the day off. He's prepared. I mean, he told everyone, he told me, you know, we're going to need this day off. And, you know, he had a 4-day like lead in to St. Patrick's Day. So incredible stuff. I want to see some video at least.
We do. I think that's what everybody wants. We just want to know that he's having a good time. Our little Bedford is out there in DC having a good time. But MP, I should say, take us home with some real stories about the real St. Patrick.
Well, you know, the crazy thing amidst the beer, the meals, everything associated, the green with St. Patrick's Day, corned beef and cabbage, is that at the end of the day, this really is a religious holiday about a saint that is tied to the heart of Ireland. But what's interesting is we're just in an ignorant time. We don't know anything. No one teaches us history. It's not even your fault. So no one knows anything about the real St. Patrick. And there are 2 documents St. Patrick actually wrote that are short. One is his Confessions and Story, and the other is a letter to some soldiers, to someone, a general ruling some soldiers. It's very strongly worded, and that you can find them online. I linked to them on Twitter today, and just read the actual St. Patrick. It's fascinating because St. Patrick is actually not Irish. He is, you could call him British. Back in the 5th century, he's on that island, and he gets taken prisoner at a very young age as a teenager and is brought over to Ireland as a slave. Slavery plays a big role in his story, and he's there for 6 years and stuck. He eventually gets back home, but God calls him in a dream to go back to the place where he was, you know, basically a traumatic experience, 6 years a slave. And God says, you're going to go back and you're going to convert those people. And he does. And he writes his Confessions. It's a real character, a real historical figure that you can read him in his own words telling his story. It's a remarkable one. And it goes to the heart of the West, of Europe, and of what Western culture used to be and used to understand. And I would say that everyone in Ireland with Conor McGregor, you know, here today, talking about the West retaining its identity, it'd be important that all of us go back and just spend a few minutes and read about the real St. Patrick.
Yeah, and I love the things that are coming out about the West right now, right? One of the stories today that we didn't even have a chance to get to, Caroline Levitt was saying about the Statue of Liberty, and France is like, hey, we might want that back, right? Send that back. And Caroline Levitt was just out there saying, oh, you know what? We're not going to send that back to you. And by the way, you're welcome that you don't speak German right now, because you do have to still go through and remind everybody what's actually happening in the country right now. And these people in Europe are freaking out, but we're just trying to be over here and maintain our sovereignty and be a little independent nation.
Yeah, well, now we have these countries looking back at America because Trump won and saying, you don't represent Western values anymore. And you got to think, like, go back to St. Patrick. You know, he thought that he was teaching even barbarians who lived beyond the border of the frontiers of the Roman Empire when he went off to the island, which was to him at the end of the world, because Ireland sort of is, right? It's the last island till you go over the sea and go to North America. That's the far-flung reaches of civilization at the time, because the Roman Empire defined civilization. So what defines Europe after that? Christianity. People converting to Christianity and creating, Christian culture. That's what created Europe, right? And you look now and you see France and these countries actually looking back and going, because of Trump, because he's for free speech, because he doesn't want war, because he doesn't think Ukraine should be part of NATO. I mean, you don't represent Western values. These people have forgotten about what Western's values are and were. They don't even know what Western values are at this point, and they're gonna critique us. It's unbelievable.
JD Vance had to go over there and make sure that they remembered that free speech was a thing, and they were scolding him during his speech over there. It's one of the better ones that he's given so far in his short tenure as vice president. But it is just so interesting to see how everything has shifted culturally, politically, just looking at where Europe is right now from where they were. There's a long ways to go for our friends across the pond.
Yeah, I mean, we're at the point where you really need, the new St. Patrick would do what? He'd be thrown in prison for his beliefs in one of the Western countries, kind of like St. Patrick, and I guess have to go back and convert them. I don't know. I mean, here's the thing though. These things are right underneath our fingertips, right? I mean, this is a holiday we celebrate now with beer, alcohol. I'm surely going to have some tonight myself in this middle of Lent. But we do this, right? But right underneath the surface is something serious that's at the heart of what made us who we are. And we can return to it. And I think that's in part what the populist movement is about. That's what's going on with Trump. It's returning back to the Constitution and these things, even though the other side says, oh no, this is all, bad stuff.
All right, we have less than a minute left. The story of the day, though, Donald Trump. We led with it off the very top of the show. He's supposed to be getting the JFK files out by tomorrow. Trump himself said that. What are we looking forward to?
I'm excited, but, I'm always cautious about this. You need to know if all the documents really are coming out or not. And it's hard to actually bring them all together. But in this case, given that RFK is in this administration and has plenty of time to talk to Trump about it, and Trump himself is a serious man, I think we should be excited.
Listen, we'll be excited until they let us down. But let's hope that doesn't happen. We'll definitely be breaking that all down for you tomorrow night and everything else that happens, because there is a lot of news these days. Thanks.